This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Happy Victory Monday. I don't know what it is about this one, but this is one of the sweeter Victory Mondays. This is a vintage one. We'll look at back at this and go, yes, I want that October 2023 vintage Victory Monday in like 6 or 7 years. This is a good one. Savor it, taste it, feel it. But on Victory Mondays and on Mondays in general, Monday mornings, what we like to do is answer some questions and do that from the fan pool. So I'm going to be doing that. Now, we're going to start with a question from Jayon, who says, what are some of your things that you keep yourself from overreacting one way or the other after a big win or loss? And what do you insulate yourself from the fans who do react in one extreme or the other? Well, I mean, given the nature of my job, there's really no insulation, right? Like there is what I think, me being confident in what I believe, and then there is what people in general believe. And in order to do this job, you have to have a good pulse on what people believe and what you believe, and you have to have confidence in both of those ideas in order to kind of present what you know in the right framework. So how I always try to ground myself from overreacting is, one, understanding in the NFL, it's week to week. I think sometimes we have a very reactionary mindset, and I think that like how college football works kind of works into that reactionary mindset where we think that every loss is the end of a season and every win is a statement victory. But in the NFL, all teams are ranked, right? All teams are really good. All teams have had success at one point. Everybody can beat everybody. So if you go into a game knowing that, one, you're never too down on any given week because you know everybody can beat everybody, but you're never too high because you also know that everybody can beat everybody. I seen Jeff Saturday beat the Kansas City Chiefs before. You know what I mean? Like, it happens. Josh Dobbs beat the Dallas Cowboys. It happens every year. It happens every week. Upsets are natural in the NFL because the NFL has great parity. Even amongst its worst teams, there are still really good players on those teams. So that's kind of how I make sure I don't go from one extreme to another. It's just understanding the league and understanding the nature of the NFL, which is everybody's really good, and understanding where the Browns sit in that paradigm. And right now, the Browns are a team that can win against anybody and lose against anybody. And when you're in that kind of in-between, it can be very volatile. But I will say the Browns have been in that in-between where they're a team that can beat anybody and lose anybody for like the last 5 years. I think a lot of people are wrapped up into the Browns cannot beat anybody and they can only lose to some guy. I mean, beat some people. And maybe that was the truth during the Hugh Jackson years, and maybe even before that during like some of the Eric Mangini stuff where the offense was truly awful. But, you know, this Browns era is different. It's not what we've hoped so far, which is championships, but this is not a team that is so far from the rest of the league or even far from the rest of the league. This is a team that has existed in the middle for the last 5 years, and they're trying to break out from being in the middle. So, you know, you just got to understand where your favorite franchise is at that current moment. What does that mean? And where does that mean you are in the picture of the NFL and what the larger picture of the NFL is? And then you'll probably have a better gauge of how to react to things. My guy Sanso says, with the Browns still in the mix of things, do you think they'll make any moves before the trade deadline? Should they move on from DPJ instead of letting him walk in the offseason? If somebody is willing to offer you a prospect at tackle or a prospect at guard, I see no reason why they wouldn't want to do that. It doesn't seem like they have any interest in DPJ getting involved in this offense. It doesn't seem like DPJ has any interest of getting involved in this offense. And when I say that, I mean, it just doesn't look like this going to work out for both of them. So if that's the case, let's give DPJ a head start instead of sitting here being thrown cold onto free agency. Give him a chance to really find a spot and use that as some, well, not collateral, but use that as a bargaining chip to try to get you what could be a solution at tackle and what could be a solution at guard. Now, again, you're not going to get somebody who's been as productive at tackle or guard, however that's measured, as DPJ has been at wide receiver. But what you can get is a flyer on a guy that was a third or second round pick that you like a lot coming out of the draft that's not starting for somebody. That's what you can get right now for DPJ. And if you can get that and you like the flyer that they're offering, then you take it. And I think you're more than happy slotting Cedric Tillman into that role, especially if we're talking about near the trade deadline, closer to the second half of the season, where you feel like a rookie would be more prepared. Or maybe you feel comfortable with David Bell being in that spot, because for all the criticism that David Bell has gotten, he's come up big in some moments here so far this season. So I think that the Browns feel like they have more than a couple of guys who could step up and take over that role for DPJ. And if somebody offers them something developmental or something that they feel like can be a solution for them, or a really solid backup plan at left tackle, just in case the wheels completely fall off of JED, then I think they'll take it. Noah Brown with the next question. If everything went the same way besides Moody making the last kick, are we still feeling good about the way the Brownies played? Me personally, I'm glad that Schwartz and the defense limited the dynamic offense way under their season average. So once the offense is healthy and back to form, it's going to be a great season. P.S. Glad we broke the white uni curse. They've come up since the Packers Christmas game. It's been hurtful to watch. Browns have had some terrible games in all white uniforms. It's glad to be able to break that out without any fear. As goofy as it sounds, it's really true. Yeah, if Moody doesn't make that kick, obviously you feel much better because you won the game and you're 3-2. If Moody does make that kick, you're a little upset with some of the stuff that happened on defense. I imagine people are a little bit more upset with Martin Emerson, even though he had an interception in that game. And I imagine people are a little bit more upset with PJ Walker throwing 2 interceptions, and we're going to be back here talking about turnovers, right? Overall, I think people will feel a little bit better knowing that the defense is real, but, you know, there would still be some of that panic in the air. So winning that game really does make a huge difference. And I think it does a huge thing for not just the fan base, but also the locker room. I think Juan Thornhill said something important. I think it's important for us to understand this. We expect athletes to exist in vacuums. They don't, right? People will say stuff when they are harassing athletes, when they are saying all kind of crazy stuff to these athletes on social media, like, well, they should be able to block it out. Well, let me ask you a question. If you think that that's something that's an acceptable thing, because I hear people even say this to me, that you should be able to just block out the noise. If somebody were tweeting at you, DMing you, tagging you, harassment, you're going to look at it. Like, I'm just going to let you know. I don't care what you think you're going to do. I don't care what you think you might do. If you have not been in that situation to where a group of people are harassing you and talking all kind of on your name, I promise you, because I used to be one of these people. It's like, I ain't going to look. I'll just delete the phone. You gon' look. There's something about the morbid curiosity in your head that when somebody is mentioning your name a million times, you're going to check that. You're going to look. You're going to see the disrespect. And the way that these algorithms work on social media, it makes it so the most disrespectful, the most crazy stuff that somebody can say floats to the top of your feed, because ultimately what these social media companies want from you is a reaction, because that's going to drive impressions. And then that gets more ads and all that stuff. But that's how the business of social media works. This is not some simple turn off your phone solution. And what Juan Thornhill said, and I thought he kept it very real, was like he sees it. Everybody sees it. People see your tweets when you tweet this stuff. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that how fans feel about the team, that does matter. How fans are reacting to the team online, that does matter, because that does trickle into the locker room. That does trickle into people's attitudes. That's really as real as I can keep it. I think this was a huge win. That kick being missed, it was huge because it gives everybody to relax. We're going to chill on this damn shoulder thing. We're going to relax a little bit, right? The tone of everything isn't so damn dramatic now. Whether Deshaun Watson plays this week or not, we're not going to be so dramatic about it. Not going to have people out here talking about the season's over. And getting rid of that kind of drama is real beneficial, I think, in the long run. Ron says, who covered Kittle all game? Whoever or whatever strategy was used, they are successful. Huge game last week. I think they're taking away Debo, and Kittle was a big reason for that success. Yeah, they do. They have a great plan against tight ends. It's worked out most of the time. I think the only time it's really hurt them was against not Travis Kelce. Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews got you. But yeah, they have a good plan with those tight ends. I think it's a great contingent of guys that stand up and play well against those tight ends. So shout out to them. Shout out to Jim Schwartz. Billy Moss says, what the most likely trade you see this team making for the next few weeks? I think it's something small for maybe a guard prospect, maybe a tackle. Somebody who could step in. Chris Russell says, when Watson comes back, do you think that will help clean up the turnover issues, or will there be a slight adjustment period from him missing time? Nobody's going to be excited about a slight adjustment period for him missing time. And I don't think there's going to be an adjustment period because he missed 3 weeks. I think there's just going to be, we're going to be reintroduced to the adjustment period that was going to exist regardless, because he just needed to get used to the offense. That is the one thing that sucks about him not being out there. These weeks would have been valuable weeks for him to get on the same page with the offense. But since he has not been able to throw, none of that work has been able to be done. So, if we expect it to be somewhere in November at the beginning of the season with this offense finally hitting all cylinders, that might get pushed back to December or January, depending on how long he's out. So you want him to come back soon, because there's still some things they need to clean up. The Tennessee game was a point in the right direction, but I don't think it was necessarily a sign that everything had been figured out. I think there's still stuff to figure out when Watson comes back in there, and that there's going to be an adjustment period, but you hope that the floor of the play that you can get from quarterback rises significantly once he's out there. Patches says, is Kevin Stefanski a good enough play caller to take you to a Super Bowl and win? We all know the defense is. I think the conversation about is Kevin Stefanski a good enough coach to win a Super Bowl is highly irrelevant. This is not quarterback coach. It's just not quarterback. And what I mean by that is, it does not take you, or it does not require, in order to win a Super Bowl, that you have a genius at head coach. Average head coaches win Super Bowls all the time. You can make every head coach that's won a Super Bowl a genius, but average head coaches win Super Bowls all the time. Mike McCarthy is a great example of this. He's an average head coach. He's no different than the ton of guys that we have had through this building in the last 20 years. Really no different. But he won a Super Bowl. Why? Well, because he had Aaron Rodgers, right? We have lived in this era where the best quarterback has also been with the best coach. So we've coincided those two things. I think that's a coincidence, right? We've seen Tom Brady win a Super Bowl with what was an average coach once he left Bill Belichick. We've seen Bill Belichick, a great coach, flounder without Tom Brady. The idea that your coach needs to be the greatest in order to win a Super Bowl, or the question of Kevin Stefanski, is he a Super Bowl ready coach? That's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. You can have a terrible coach and get to the Super Bowl. Zach Taylor's not a good coach. He almost won the Super Bowl. You can say that the reason they didn't go to win the Super Bowl is Zach Taylor, but I would say it was their offensive line. The players are what get you to a Super Bowl. If your players are great, if you execute well, your play calling looks fine and your coaching looks fine. But it's the players. No coach has ever gotten to the Super Bowl with a bad roster because he's so good at coaching. Nobody play calls their way into a Super Bowl championship. People quarterback their ways into that. People wide receiver their way into that. And back in the day, people used to running back their way into that. But you don't coach your way into a Super Bowl championship. You just don't. Maybe the closest thing you can say is when Nick Foles won it with Doug Peterson, but then they fired Doug Peterson like 2 years after that. Coaching is probably one of, if not the least important things on the Super Bowl ready cap. Like, you don't ask yourself if you have a Super Bowl ready running back. You don't ask yourself if you have a Super Bowl caliber punter. You don't ask yourself if you have a Super Bowl caliber long snapper, because those aren't the things that decide if you get to the Super Bowl. The coach is not what's going to decide. You could be mid and you can get to the Super Bowl as a coach. You can be great and get to the Super Bowl coach. You can be great and never get to the Super Bowl. Andy Reid is a great coach. He didn't get to the Super Bowl until he got Pat Mahomes. He didn't win one until he got Pat Mahomes. My bad. He got there with Donovan McNabb, but he didn't win the big one until he got Pat Mahomes. Players are what take you over the top, not coaches. You can have a great roster, some average coaches, and you'll be fine. As long as your coaches are average. Now, if they're out here doing Freddie Kitchens 2019 stuff, okay, you got a problem. If they're out here doing Nathaniel Hackett stuff, okay, you got a problem. But in all, most coaches, all they have to be is average. And if you're average as a coach, that's enough. It's kind of like special teams. You just don't want the coach to mess it up. And contrary to whatever people believe, I don't think Kevin's been the reason why the offense hasn't been like, I don't think he's the reason why they're successful, but I just think that they're just not executing well. They haven't had their starting quarterback in a while. When they did, they were executing fine enough. Like, it's more about the players on the field than it is about the coaching. And I don't get why we're making such a big deal about the coaching. I really don't. It just doesn't matter as much. And that's where I'm at, where I'm like, I just don't want to fire a coach unless I have to, because it's more trouble than it's worth. And they're just they're not that important for game day stuff that you have to fire them if something goes wrong on game day. They're more important for like development and long-term stuff, where if you want to draft a player, you want to make sure that that player is going into a plan, and keeping the coach is a way to make sure that there's a plan, right? If you want to have development like Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cincinnati have had, well, it's no mistake that they've had the same coaches for a very long time. And that really does help with development. That's what coaches are important for. The day-to-day, the game day stuff, that's probably the least important thing they do, or the least impactful thing that they do. I don't think the play calling stuff matters as much as we want it to. I think it's an easy thing to point at, and it's an easy thing to blame games on, win or loss. And yeah, there's some moments here where it does matter, but all in all, like, you're usually talking about somebody dropping a pass. That's the problem. You're usually talking about somebody throwing an interception that costs you a game. You're usually talking about somebody missing a kick it's execution that matters. You know what I mean? And if you don't have players that can execute, then you're just going to be in trouble. The coaching ain't going to change that. Fred Heim says, do you think that Kareem Hunt should be the starting running back over Jerome Ford right now? Yeah, I think they should go 1-2. I think Jerome Ford should be kind of in a supplemental role. I think his style fits better as that. I don't think he has a feature back style. I think Kareem has a more feature back style than him. But the way that Kareem runs, I don't know if he could take like 30 carries at this time in his career. So maybe you have to fit in some Pierre Strong. David Ravel says, will the Browns now be forced to carry all three quarterbacks on the 53-man roster. Hey, they did last year. So that's what it takes. That's what it takes. Kenneth says, so with our defense and schedule, do you think the Browns hold out Watson until he's 100% to play him? I'll say this, and I'll say this again. I think they're holding out Watson because they don't want him to play if he has to adjust his throwing motion, because that can cause problems down the line. There is no, oh, well, we could throw him in there and 40% of Watson's better than 100% of PJ Walker. I don't think that's the equation going on in there. I don't think this is a matter of the percentage of Watson you're going to get. I think right now you can't get anything out of him until he's fully healed, because if you try to get anything out of him, you might never get anything out of him again, because you might mess up his throwing motion, you might mess up his mechanics, you might mess up his muscle memory, and that is massive down the line. So this is a situation where in the short term, you're going to take some hits. People aren't going to like how you're dealing with it. People are going to have all this criticism for how you're dealing with it. But I think we're going to look back at this from 10,000 feet and go, oh, we were a little bit ridiculous about that. That was actually the right move. Kind of like how we were with Baker Mayfield, right? Where we thought it was the right move for Baker to play right away after he got hurt. And then once we zoomed away from the season, we were like, man, that was a big mistake for him to play right after he got hurt. You don't want to play hindsight being 2020 with this. You don't want to be trying to trade for another quarterback and having him play with this injury, if he's not 100%, is a surefire way to be trading for another quarterback in a year or two. So that's my 2 cents on that. But that's it for the post-game Q&A. Appreciate this Victory Monday. Y'all have a great day. Have you a better night.